The rain's already started. Let me tell you a story. No rush, no noise, just a calm place to rest your thoughts. But before we start, make sure you hit that subscribe button. By the way, what time is it where you are right now? Clouds over apartment 3B. It was the kind of afternoon that felt like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be. Not warm, not cold. The sky, a soft watercolor of pale blue, and cloud edges that never seemed to settle into a shape. I had been sitting at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, not really doing anything, half a cup of tea going cold beside me, an open notebook I hadn't written in since the week before, the kind of stillness that isn't sad exactly, just hovering. Outside my window, which looked across the narrow courtyard between our buildings, laundry lines swayed gently in the wind, and a few pigeons wandered across a ledge like they had somewhere more important to be. I might have missed it if I hadn't looked up at just the right moment, a flash of movement. Something pale and fluttering drifting across my field of vision like a leaf caught in a breath. At first I thought it was trash, a napkin, or an old flyer, something discarded and carried by the breeze, but as it floated lower, I could see the shape was too precise, too intentional. A paper airplane, white, creased sharply, made with care. It circled once in the wind and then coasted downward, landing softly on the edge of the fire escape just below my window. I leaned out to see where it had come from, and that's when I noticed the window across the way, third floor, second from the left, was open, curtain pulled back just a little. No one visible, just that small, quiet opening, a portal, almost. I hesitated, then climbed down the short step to the fire escape landing and gently picked up the paper plane. There was something written on it, small and tidy, just a sentence. Sometimes I think the sky listens better than people do. No name, no decoration, just that. I read it twice. Then I folded it again, placed it on my kitchen table, and sat with it in the silence, as if the words had been waiting for me to find them. And, in some strange way, it felt like they had. They didn't come every day, and never at the same time, which somehow made them feel even more intentional, like the rhythm wasn't meant to be predictable, only honest. Some arrived mid-morning, drifting gently through shafts of light like leaves in early fall. Others came just after dusk, when the wind grew soft and heavy with the smell of rain, and the courtyard fell quiet except for the occasional clink of a spoon or the sound of a dog padding down the stairwell below. Each one was made with the same care-crisp folds, tight edges, paper that seemed to be pulled from the same worn notebook or pad. Always the same window, third floor, second from the left. Apartment 3B, always the same release, the brief flick of a wrist, or sometimes just a tilt of the hand, letting gravity do the rest. And always, always a single sentence, written neatly in black ink like it had been carried around in someone's mind for days before finally being let go. I never saw the sender. The curtain would sway, sometimes ripple, but no face ever appeared. No name, no hint. It wasn't anonymous in a distant way, it was private in a gentle one. Like whoever was behind the window wasn't hiding from the world, just whispering softly enough that only someone listening closely would hear. I began collecting them, not out of habit, but out of something deeper, something like reverence. I kept them in a shallow wooden tray on my bookshelf, lined up carefully so the folds wouldn't crumple, each one like a message from someone I hadn't met but already trusted. Some were poetic, some were strange. Loneliness is just love that hasn't found a place to land. Some mornings I wake up and pretend I'm a different version of myself just to see how it feels. Do you ever miss someone you've never met? I didn't know who they were written for or if they were meant for anyone at all, but somehow they found me, and slowly, so quietly I didn't notice at first, they began to carve out a space in me that had been closed for a long time. A space where wonder could exist again, unannounced. A space where words didn't have to explain everything to still mean something. And maybe, in some strange way, that was what I needed. Not conversation, not confession, just this, a small, folded kind of language drifting down through the stillness, waiting to be opened. It took me longer than I want to admit to even consider writing something back, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to break whatever this was. There was something sacred about it, something clean and uninterrupted, like a still pond that held the reflection of something more delicate than the real world could offer. I think I was afraid that if I responded, I might change. It might make it about me, when maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe these paper planes were someone's way of clearing space inside themselves, of letting go of thoughts they didn't know where else to place. And yet, every time a new one landed, each more quietly than the last, almost shy in the way they arrived, I felt a question forming in me. Not spoken, not sharp, just a gentle wondering, could this be a conversation, or is it something else entirely, something softer, something meant to stay one-sided? The idea of writing back didn't feel like a need to intrude, but a wish to be honest, to say, in my own quiet way, I hear you. I understand what it is to hold thoughts that have no home. I understand the relief of setting something free without needing a reply. But even so, I found myself folding a piece of paper one evening, without really thinking about it, the same simple shape, creased carefully, nothing fancy. I stared at the blank space inside for a long time. I didn't want to say much, just enough, just something true. In the end, I wrote, I don't know who you are, but your words feel like sitting beside someone in comfortable silence. Thank you. I signed nothing, left no clue, just that. I didn't send it right away. I left it by the window for 3 nights, watching it, thinking maybe I'd throw it out or tuck it into the back of a drawer and pretend I never considered sending it. But then, on the 4th night, I saw the light go on in apartment 3B, the soft glow of a desk lamp, nothing dramatic. And I knew, without really planning it, I stepped out onto the fire escape, took a breath, and let the paper go. It fluttered once, caught the breeze, and drifted across the courtyard. I didn't see where it landed. I didn't wait at the window. I just sat back down at the kitchen table, the one where all the others still rested in their quiet little tray, and told myself gently, it's okay. You can speak too, even if no one answers. The days after I let mine go were quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the story was taking a breath. I watched the window across the courtyard with the same rhythm as before, not expecting, just noticing. I kept telling myself that I hadn't sent it to receive anything, that the act of folding the paper, of writing those few honest words, had been enough. And in many ways, it had. There was something strangely comforting in the stillness that followed, not empty, but full of presence. Like when you finish a long conversation and sit in the hush that comes after, where nothing else needs to be said for a while. I returned to the ordinary rhythms of my life, watering plants, answering emails, standing in front of the fridge, trying to remember what I'd meant to eat. But there was a part of me tuned differently now, a softness I hadn't known I could carry. On the fifth night, just after the sun had gone, I heard it, the faint scrape of something against the railing outside my window. I didn't move at first, let it sit there a while. When I finally stepped out onto the fire escape, there it was, another plane. But this one was different. Not white, not folded from a torn journal page. This one was pale blue, just slightly crinkled, and on one of its wings, in the smallest handwriting I'd ever seen, was a message that read, "Some silences are meant to be shared. Thank you for being quiet with me." My chest tightened the way it does when something lands exactly where it's needed, not because it answers anything, but because it meets you where you are. I held the paper in both hands and sat down right there on the metal steps, the air a little cooler than usual, the world soft around the edges. No signature, no invitation, just presence. Again, but this time shared. And I remember thinking, maybe this is how some people speak, not in sentences, but in pauses, not in voices, but in gestures folded carefully, released into the sky, hoping someone on the other side will catch the weight of what isn't said. And somehow I had. After that pale blue plane arrived, something shifted, not in any obvious way, but in the way the air feels right before it rains, when the light changes just slightly, and you realize you're paying attention to things you didn't notice before. There was no agreement, no pattern we ever spoke aloud, but over time, the rhythm of it began to settle into something that felt like its own quiet language. I would send one now, and then fold it carefully, never too much, never rushed, and every few days one would return. Never a direct reply, never a continuation, just a soft response in tone, like two people humming different notes in the same key. I didn't overthink what I wrote anymore. Sometimes it was a sentence that had stayed with me all day. I passed someone on the street who looked like a person I miss. Or I used to be afraid of stillness, but now I think it's where the truth lives. Other times it was a memory I hadn't shared with anyone small. Ordinary things that didn't seem to belong in conversations, but felt safe here. The replies I received were equally gentle, always a little mysterious, but never cold. I leave the hallway light on longer than I need to. It's not for me. Or, the first time I tasted rain was the day I stopped running from it. Each one arrived like it had floated through a dream before landing on my windowsill. And though we never saw each other, not once, no glimpses through the curtains, no silhouettes behind the glass, I began to feel like we were sitting across from one another, just on opposite sides of the sky. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about friendship, at least not the way people usually mean it. It was something quieter than that. A presence, a thread, a recognition that someone else, somewhere close, was moving through their own life with the same tenderness, the same care. And somehow, in a world full of noise, that had become the most comforting truth I knew, that I wasn't alone in my quiet, that someone else had made space for it too. And together, without ever saying so, We were writing a story that didn't need to be finished to be real. I don't know when I realized they'd stopped. It wasn't dramatic, like a door slamming or a light turning off. It was more like a song that fades before you notice the silence. I kept looking out each evening without meaning to, the way you check for something out of habit rather than hope. But the sky across the courtyard stayed quiet. No fluttering shapes, no messages folded between the breeze, just the stillness of early dusk, and the window in apartment 3B drawn, closed for the first time in weeks. At first I told myself they were probably away or maybe just needed a break, and that felt fine, truly. I didn't feel abandoned, only paused. And there was something tender in that, too. I had been holding the ritual gently all along, like something borrowed, and maybe it had simply returned to wherever it had come from. Still, I missed it, not the notes themselves, but the rhythm of it, the quiet exchange, the knowing that someone else was moving through their own small life in parallel to mine. I caught myself writing anyway, not to send, just to remember how it felt. I filled 2 folded pages and tucked them into a drawer, not with longing, but with gratitude. It surprised me how easily the silence sat beside me now. Not heavy, not sad, just present, like an old friend who didn't need to speak to make you feel understood. And maybe that's what had changed most in me, not the presence of the airplanes, but the part of me that had softened enough to listen when they stopped. I still looked at that window sometimes, but no longer waited for anything to fall from it. I just let it be what it was. A window, a sky, a chapter I didn't need to end to know it had mattered. And somewhere in the stillness of those evenings, I heard a quiet voice in my chest, one that hadn't spoken in a long time, say, gently, "It's okay to rest here. You've already received what you needed." It came back to me in the gentlest way, not falling from the sky, not folded into the air, but resting on the ledge just outside my window like it had been placed there with care and a steady hand. I didn't see it arrive. I had been in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, letting my thoughts wander through the quietness that had become almost companionable by then. But when I stepped back into the room, I saw it not a plane this time, but a small square envelope, sealed with a strip of tape, pale blue, like the paper used weeks ago. My first instinct wasn't excitement, it was stillness. A kind of quiet inside me that said, "Be slow, be soft with this." I reached out, hands careful, and brought it inside, letting it sit on the table for a moment before I opened it, the way you do with something that feels sacred. Inside was a single card, no letter, no long message, just a small Polaroid photograph, slightly faded. The image was of a sky cloudy, softly lit, maybe taken from the very window across from mine. There was nothing else in the frame. No buildings, no faces, just clouds layered in soft grays and silver, the kind you stare into without expecting anything. And on the back, in the same neat handwriting I'd come to recognize, were just 5 words: "For the days that drift." I held it for a long time, not smiling, not crying, just letting something unspoken pass through me like a current. I didn't need to know why it had been sent or what it meant. That was the beauty of it. It didn't ask anything of me, no reply, no interpretation. It simply arrived, like so many of the others had, and gave me something I didn't know I needed. And maybe that was the most generous thing of all, a gesture that didn't explain itself, just presence, just offering. A reminder that even when the paper planes stop, even when the sky feels still, someone somewhere might still be thinking of you, not urgently, not constantly, but kindly. And sometimes that's more than enough. It's been weeks now, maybe longer, since anything arrived. No planes, no photographs, no glimpses of movement behind that third floor window. And yet, I don't feel the absence in the way I thought I would. If anything, it feels like something quietly completed itself, not finished exactly, but closed the way a page turns when it's ready. The tray where I kept the folded planes still sits on my shelf, though I rarely open it anymore. Not because I've forgotten, but because I don't need to look at them to feel what they gave me. They live in my mornings now in the way I pause at the window with my coffee, not expecting anything to fall from the sky, but letting myself listen anyway. They live in my conversations and how I've learned to hear what's unspoken, to hold space for someone's silence as much as their words. And they live in the small, steady ways I've begun to show up for my own life, slower, softer, more open to moments that don't announce themselves as important, but end up shaping everything. I never met the person behind the planes. I never saw their face, never heard their voice, never learned why they began or why they stopped. But that's the thing, I don't need to. Some people pass through your life like weather brief, shifting, impossible to hold, and still they leave you changed. Not with big gestures or loud endings, but with something quieter. A blue paper airplane, a sentence at just the right time, a reminder that connection doesn't always need a name to matter. It's enough to have felt seen, to have offered something back, to have met someone in the in-between and known, even for a moment, that you weren't alone in it. And now, when the sky drifts and the air softens and I don't know what to make of the day, I look across the courtyard toward a quiet window on the third floor, and I think, whatever it was real. And that's more than enough.